Just 2 minutes ago, Donald Trump sent shockwaves through the automotive world with a fiery announcement targeting one of America's most iconic truck brands, Ram. Standing at the podium with cameras rolling and headlines already forming, Trump did what he does best. He declared war on a company he believes betrayed American workers. The message was crystal clear. If Ram wants to manufacture trucks outside of the United States, they will pay the price. And that price? Massive tariffs. Trump's speech was filled with his signature bravado, framing the move as a bold stand against corporate greed and an act of patriotism to protect American jobs. He accused Ram's leadership of selling out to foreign markets, jeopardizing American manufacturing and prioritizing profits over people. For months, there had been whispers that Ram's parent company, Stellantis, was considering shifting more production overseas. And now, Trump had seized the moment, making sure the American people knew he wasn't going to let it slide. We build in America. We buy American. We protect American jobs. And if any company wants to take their business elsewhere, they can expect tariffs. Big ones. The crowd erupted in applause. But in corporate boardrooms, the reaction was anything but celebratory. To understand why Trump's announcement is such a big deal, we need to dive into Ram's global strategy. Ram, once just a division under Chrysler, is now part of Stellantis, a massive automotive conglomerate that spans across Europe and North America. Over the years, Ram has positioned itself as the go-to brand for rugged, powerful, American-made trucks. But here's the issue. Not all of them are built in America anymore. Why? Because global supply chains have changed everything. Labor costs in the U.S. are high. Building trucks overseas means cutting expenses and boosting profit margins. Raw materials are cheaper abroad. Companies can source parts from Mexico, Canada, and even Europe at lower costs. Competitive pressure is fierce. Ford and Chevy are already innovating with electric trucks, and Ram is trying to keep up. For years, Ram has carefully balanced its American identity with global efficiency. Many of its trucks are still assembled in U.S. plants, but crucial components, from transmissions to electronics, come from overseas. But now, Trump's tariff hammer threatens to disrupt this entire strategy. If Ram is forced to move production back to the U.S., costs will skyrocket. That means one thing: higher truck prices for consumers. And Ram's loyal customers won't be happy. The moment Trump walked off that stage, the real chaos began. Ram's corporate leadership immediately went into crisis mode. Would they backtrack on their global strategy? Would they fight the tariffs? Or would they accept the penalties and pass the cost on to customers? No easy answers. Wall Street reacted instantly. Within minutes, Stellantis stock took a hit as investors panicked about how tariffs could impact sales and production costs. If prices rise, will Ram trucks still be competitive? Dealerships started bracing for impact. Ram trucks are already a premium product. Any additional costs could push customers to Ford, Chevy, or Toyota. Dealers began fielding calls from anxious customers asking if truck prices were about to surge. Consumers were split. Some cheered Trump's decision, seeing it as a necessary move to protect American jobs. Others worried that this would only hurt them, forcing them to pay more for the trucks they love. One thing was certain: this was no ordinary tariff announcement. This was a direct challenge to a major American brand, and the consequences were only beginning to unfold. And that's where the real battle begins. The industry reacts. Trump's announcement had barely finished echoing across the news cycle before the auto industry erupted into chaos. Inside the boardrooms of America's biggest car manufacturers, executives were scrambling to decipher what this meant for them. If Ram was the first target, who was next? Would Ford, Chevrolet, and even foreign brands like Toyota and Volkswagen soon find themselves in Trump's crosshairs? The stakes were impossibly high, and no one could afford to sit back and wait. At Ram headquarters, phones rang nonstop as dealers and suppliers demanded answers. Customers walked into showrooms not to buy, but to ask whether their next truck would suddenly cost thousands more. The uncertainty was already bleeding into the market, and the effects were spreading like wildfire. While Ram found itself under the microscope, other manufacturers saw an opportunity. Ford and Chevrolet quickly adjusted their marketing strategies, doubling down on their American-made branding. Advertisements flooded social media, emphasizing their commitment to U.S. manufacturing, subtly implying that they were the better choice for patriotic buyers. Meanwhile, Toyota, Nissan, and Honda, with large U.S. production plants, watched the unfolding drama closely, calculating whether this tariff battle could be a backdoor advantage for them in an increasingly turbulent market. For dealerships, the situation was complicated. On one hand, tariffs meant the potential for higher prices, making sales more difficult. On the other hand, buyers who feared looming cost hikes were rushing to lock in current prices before increases took effect. Some dealerships reported a surge in interest, while others braced for a longer-term slowdown once the dust settled. The political world was no quieter. Supporters of Trump's decision hailed it as a necessary stand against corporate outsourcing, a step toward revitalizing American manufacturing. Conservative commentators praised the president for holding companies accountable, pushing them to keep jobs in the U.S. But critics were quick to fire back, warning that this aggressive approach could backfire, hurting American consumers more than it protected them. Economists were divided. Some saw tariffs as a potential catalyst for renewed domestic manufacturing, forcing companies to reinvest in American workers and factories. Others feared this was a dangerous precedent. If automakers were punished for shifting production overseas, how long before other industries faced the same restrictions? Would electronics companies be next? Tech giants? Pharmaceutical firms? The ripples of Trump's decision extended far beyond the auto industry, into the heart of America's economic policies. Meanwhile, Ram was left trying to figure out how to move forward. Should they challenge the tariffs legally, arguing that global supply chains are a necessity in today's market? Should they attempt to relocate production back to the U.S., absorbing massive costs to avoid the penalties? Or should they simply accept the new reality, raise prices, and hope customers stayed loyal despite the increases? There was no easy answer, and the next few weeks would be crucial. If Ram made the wrong move, they could lose not just money but consumer trust. If they played their cards right, they might emerge stronger than before. One thing was clear. This wasn't just a simple trade dispute. This was a battle for the future of the auto industry, and no one could afford to lose. A long-term game. The fallout from Trump's tariff threat was only beginning, but Ram knew that hesitation wasn't an option. With Wall Street panicking and consumers on edge, the company needed a plan, and fast. Executives gathered in emergency meetings weighing their options. One thing was clear: this wasn't just a short-term crisis. This was a long-term fight that would determine Ram's future, and every decision they made had the potential to reshape the company forever. The first option was to fight back. Legal teams scrambled to find a way to challenge the tariffs, hoping to prove that these trade restrictions would do more harm than good. Industry lobbyists were already knocking on doors in Washington, warning lawmakers that this kind of interference in global supply chains could cripple not just Ram, but the entire automotive sector. If companies were penalized for moving production where it made the most financial sense, where would it stop? Would tariffs soon hit every industry with global ties? The second option was to adapt. Could Ram shift more production back to the United States? That move would be costly. Setting up new manufacturing plants, hiring workers, and re-establishing domestic supply chains would take years, not months. And even if Ram could make the shift, would consumers be willing to pay the higher prices that came with it? The company had spent years perfecting the balance between cost efficiency and American identity. Now they had to decide which one mattered more. Meanwhile, tensions between Washington and the automotive industry were escalating. Other automakers watched closely, wondering if they might be next. If Trump's tariffs were successful in forcing Ram to change its strategy, would Ford and GM face the same fate? Was this the beginning of a larger push to force all American car brands to produce entirely within U.S. borders? Foreign automakers also found themselves in the crosshairs. Toyota, Honda, and Volkswagen had significant U.S. operations, but they also relied on global supply chains. If the U.S. government continued down this path, international trade relationships could be at risk. Countries that had invested heavily in American manufacturing might start looking elsewhere, wary of an unpredictable economic landscape. At the heart of it all was the consumer. Truck buyers were fiercely loyal, but even they had their limits. If Ram trucks became significantly more expensive, would they stick with the brand, or would they start looking at competitors? Could Ford and Chevy capitalize on the situation, offering similar trucks without the price hikes? Dealers were already feeling the pressure. Customers were walking in, asking tough questions. Should they buy now before prices went up? Or should they wait and see if Ram found a way to avoid the tariffs? Despite the uncertainty, one thing was undeniable. This was no longer just about Ram. This was about the future of American manufacturing, trade policies, and how companies navigated an increasingly volatile global market. And with every passing day, the stakes grew higher. The new landscape. The tension surrounding Trump's tariffs on Ram had reached its boiling point. The global market was watching, automakers were recalculating their strategies, and consumers were left wondering what the future of their beloved trucks would look like. The storm wasn't over yet. If anything, it was about to reshape the automotive industry in ways few had anticipated. As the dust settled, it became clear that the repercussions of these tariffs extended far beyond Ram. Ford and Chevrolet, Ram's biggest competitors, saw an opening and wasted no time in capitalizing on the uncertainty. Their marketing teams doubled down, emphasizing their commitment to American-made vehicles while subtly reminding consumers that their trucks weren't facing the same risks. Sales teams at dealerships across the country were given new scripts urging customers to act fast before the industry became even more unstable. Meanwhile, advertising campaigns pushed the idea that Ford and Chevy were the true American brands, standing firm amid economic turbulence. Meanwhile, global automakers like Toyota and Volkswagen were quietly reassessing their U.S. operations. If tariffs could be imposed on Ram, what was stopping the government from targeting other brands? The result was a wave of uncertainty across the industry, with executives weighing whether to expand production in the U.S. or shift resources elsewhere to avoid becoming the next target. Some foreign automakers even began lobbying in Washington, attempting to secure assurances that their supply chains wouldn't face the same fate as Ram's. For Ram, the choices were shrinking. The legal battle against the tariffs was slow-moving, and while the company's lobbyists continued to push back against the new policies, the reality was setting in. Tariffs were here, and they weren't going away anytime soon. That meant making hard decisions about production, pricing, and branding. Internal discussions at Ram grew tense. Would they absorb the costs and take the financial hit, or pass those costs onto their customers? Could they afford to shift production back to the U.S., or would it be too late to make that kind of move? Ram dealers began adjusting their pricing strategies, preparing for the possibility of reduced inventory and increased costs. Some dealerships saw a surge in purchases from consumers trying to buy trucks before the tariffs fully took effect, while others braced for the long-term impact of dwindling affordability. The market was shifting in real time, and no one knew exactly where it would land. For many dealerships, the worst-case scenario was already unfolding: dwindling stock, panicked customers, and an uncertain future. At the same time, politicians were deep in debate. Supporters of the tariffs argued that this was a necessary move to bring back American jobs and end reliance on foreign manufacturing. They claimed that tough measures were the only way to force companies to reinvest in the U.S. economy and strengthen domestic supply chains. But critics warned that this aggressive economic strategy could trigger unintended consequences, from retaliatory tariffs by other nations to a potential recession. The uncertainty stretched far beyond the auto industry, sparking debates about how these policies would impact other sectors that relied on global supply chains. And then there was the international response. Foreign governments took note of Trump's actions, and some were already considering their own retaliatory tariffs. The European Union hinted at trade restrictions on American-made cars, while Asian manufacturers started shifting investments away from the U.S. market. This kind of economic standoff had the potential to spiral out of control, further destabilizing the very industries Trump's policies were supposed to protect. Diplomats scrambled to prevent an all-out trade war, but the situation remained delicate. But one question remained: what would consumers do? Would Ram loyalists absorb the price hikes to stay with the brand they loved, or would they explore alternatives? Would buyers shift to competitors like Ford and Chevy, or would they hold off on purchases altogether, waiting to see how the industry adapted? These were the decisions that would ultimately determine Ram's fate in this new economic landscape. Truck enthusiasts, who had once been die-hard Ram supporters, were now considering alternatives, weighing their options in a world where costs were rising and certainty was fading. Ram's leadership knew they had to act fast. The brand's identity had always been built on strength, resilience, and reliability. But could those values withstand an economic war? The company needed a strategy that would not only protect its market share, but also reassure consumers that Ram wasn't going anywhere. New incentives, potential manufacturing shifts, and consumer outreach programs were all on the table. The battle for the hearts and wallets of truck buyers had begun, and Ram was at the center of the fight. With each passing day, the future of American manufacturing, trade policies, and corporate strategy became more unpredictable. What started as a single announcement had snowballed into a defining moment for the automotive industry, testing the resilience of companies, the patience of consumers, and the strength of the economy itself. And as for Ram, the battle was far from over. The company had a choice: adapt to the new landscape or risk becoming a relic of the past. One thing was certain: this fight wasn't just about one truck brand, it was about the future of an entire industry.